All right, once that's complete, we can go ahead and start removing 2 of the tie rods adjacent to each other. We'll keep 2 of the tie rods in place for a step we'll be doing in the future. And what we want to do at this point is go ahead and mark a spot on the shaft, so when we reset our bearings, we know that the assembly is going to be in the right position. All right, the next thing we're going to do is just loosen the top of the mechanical seal face nuts, so once we remove the bearing housing, we're not applying added pressure. You also at this point want to make sure you remove the cooling line fitting on the part of the mechanical seal, because once you've lifted the bearing housing up, it will try to grab on the side of the face here. So you want to make sure you get that out of the way. Next step is easy. We'll go ahead and remove the keyway and then do the disassembly of this bearing housing plate. And that'll come right up. When we're taking the lock nut off, one thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and lock down the assembly with these 2 remaining tie rods that we kept on. Now the way we can do that is use spring washers or just regular washers and apply them to the tie rods, because you'll see in this area here we don't have any threading anymore. So what that'll allow us to do is use all the threading that we do have and still keep the assembly down tight so it won't pull away when we're applying pressure on the bottom of the shaft. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to use a tool that we made here that will allow us to pull the assembly up to lock down the shafts so we can actually remove the lock nut. So you have a plug at the bottom you'll need to remove. And with a set of vice grips for this application, we'll screw it into the bottom and then raise the assembly up as needed. Now you'll want to raise the assembly until you cannot raise it anymore. This will put pressure on the assembly so you can remove the lock nut. See, at this point, we cannot spin the shaft by hand anymore, so we know we're in a good place. At this point, we'll take our spanner, stick it on the groove, and remove the lock nut and the lock washer. Now we're ready to take off the bearing housing. To do so, you're going to need to remove the 4 nuts along the side of the base. Also, another reason why we add these nuts and washers is so when we actually pull the bearing housing up, since the bearings are actually grabbed onto the shaft, it'll too try to pull the entire assembly up. So we keep that locked down. And with our 2-jaw bearing puller, we'll go ahead and set around the bearing housing. Then we'll tighten until we can't free spin it anymore along the edges of the bearing housing here. Then you back it off and remove your puller. Now once the bearings are free, we'll set that aside. Clear off some of the debris you may have caused. Take off a spacer washer that actually will sit on the edge of the bearings, so it may actually kind of glue itself to the bottom there, so make sure you don't lose that.